So hello, we are making very good use of the very short delay that has to do with the translation, and you see we have improved the sitting. I mean, it still looks a bit special, I have to say, but it is much better than before. Speaking about visibility, so very much welcome to this debate. We call it the Tischner debate, called after Josef Tischner. I had a quick chat yesterday with our friends in the back row about Josef Tischner, who was a very important person, not only for Poland and for very many people in Poland, but also for the Institute for Human Sciences, the IWM in Vienna. We are organizing this Tischner debate for the IWM already for quite many years. It was started by two people that also have a name for very many of you, by Krzysztof Michalski and Marcin Król. Marcin Król was also mentioned in our last talk, as it happens, inside. So these two started the debate. The IWM is doing this for many years, and for the very first time, and Krzysztof, I'm looking at you, we will see, maybe not for the last time, but the very first time, we are organizing the debate that so far always happened in Warsaw, in Krasnogruda. And we are very happy about this cooperation. Thanks to Krzysztof, to the Borderland Foundation for doing it here. It's a great opportunity. And we not only shifted the place of the debate, but I think it also had an impact on what we are doing with the Tischner debate, because doing this debate here in Krasnogruda, so very close to the border to Belarus, I thought that this is a great opportunity to also speak about this country that is not so very much in the focus of attention, to say it very cautiously, and to remind what is going on in Belarus, not only the events from 2020, 2021, when the country was more highlighted also in media, which has unfortunately changed over the course of the years. We are almost exactly 5 years after the start of the revolutionary movements. Revolution is also something that you are very much speaking about here in the summer school in Krasnogruda. The title for this talk today is Belarus, Revolution and Repression. And we will have two parts for the debate. And if you want, one can say that the first part is rather revolution, the second part rather repression, but this is only for the sake of saying it now. Obviously, both things cannot be differentiated, cannot be kept from each other very precisely. We start with these four people that are already sitting there waiting. I will hand over to Marcy Shore soon, who will moderate the first panel. And the guests on the panel are Pavel Barkouski, a philosopher from Belarus, now living in Warsaw, and Andrzej Gniazdowski, a philosopher from Poland. They have edited a book, bilingual, Polish-Belarusian, on what they call the phenomenology of the revolution. This is the subtitle. The main title is The Awakening of Belarus. This is a bit, we are not doing a book talk, but it's a bit like, this is the starting point for what these three will be discussing. And as it happened, which I didn't know, also Olga Szparaga is here, and I didn't know about it until I arrived yesterday. And spontaneously, Olga will also join the debate. Olga is a philosopher also coming from Belarus, now living for many years abroad, couple of years, let's say. And as it happens, these two who co-edited the book, co-wrote the book, Pavel Barkouski and Andrzej Gniazdowski, are fellows of the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna in the past. And as it happens, Olga as well, who was our fellow for quite some time. So very nice to have you all here. I will hand over to Marcy, and I will say few more words about the second part of the debate. When we come to the second part of the debate, we agreed on roughly having 1 hour for this first part. We will have a very short break then, and then continue with the second part. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Ludger. Thank you, all of you, for coming. I'm so happy to see Ludger here in Krasnogruda. So I've been working with Ludger at the Institute for Human Sciences for over 20 years now. This is the first time I'm seeing him in Krasnogruda, and we share a lot of references, including to Tischner and to Krzysztof Michalski and to Marcin Król. For those of you who are at our seminar in the morning, I'll just add a little footnote that Polish philosopher Marcin Król, back in 1966, when he was a student of Leszek Kołakowski, went to Kołakowski and said he wanted to write his thesis about the Camus-Sartre split, which is what Krzysztof was talking about this morning. And Kołakowski said, "You're not ready yet." Now you're going to write about the epistemological absolute in Descartes and Husserl. Later you'll write about the Camus-Sartre split. So I'm really delighted to have Andrzej and Olga and Pavel here. There's a lot to talk about in this book. Olga has been drafted at the last minute, but Olga appears a lot in the book. And so I thought, since she exists in the book and is part of the conversation, we had to take advantage of the fact that she's also a live person who happens to be here with us, which I'm very happy about. So this book is about the Polish experience of Solidarność, and the Belarusian, what Olga calls revolution in progress, from 2020. And I would say there are two central kind of motifs, one of which is about the relationship between Poland and Belarus, and has to do with a long history of difficult and then less difficult and sometimes more difficult relationships, and also has a lot to do with the very particular polityka wschodnia, the politics of the East, that was developed around Jerzy Giedroyć and Juliusz Mieroszewski and the group around Kultura. What does it mean for a Poland that is taking a different form and a reborn form after the Second World War to have a different relationship with its Eastern neighbors than it has had in the past? So part of the book is about the relationship between these two countries, and part of the book is a comparison between two revolutionary experiences that begs the question or pushes the question, what does revolution mean? What does it mean for there to be a revolution? Does the is revolution something we conceptualize in purely political terms? Is revolution something that also happens in social terms? Is revolution something that happens in existential terms and philosophical terms? And this book kind of has, in some sense, its basis in conversations that were happening. I think Sławek Sierakowski played a role in organizing some of these dialogues. Andrzej Friszka in Gdańsk, in Warsaw, if I'm remembering correctly. In Warsaw. And so the book is, in some sense, a kind of continuation of these conversations that were also happening in person, and an attempt to understand these revolutionary experiences. And how do societies change and how do individuals change? So I am now going to stop talking very much. I'm going to maybe ask Pavel and Andrzej to introduce the book. Let me also say, this is a bilingual book. So it was written in Polish and Belarusian. I only read the Polish part, but I think the Belarusian part is the same thing, but in translation, right? Okay, so we've covered the book. Hopefully the same. But that also has to do with one of the motifs of the book, which is the role of inclusivity in revolution. And when are revolutionary moments able to leap outside a narrow definition of what has constituted a society or a community or a nation and cast a web much more broadly. And both in the case of Solidarność and in the case of the Belarusian Revolution, this idea of inclusivity, of bringing in communities that perhaps had been previously marginalized and of overcoming social divisions, was very key to that revolutionary experience. So I will stop there, and I will ask Andrzej and Pavel, whoever wants to go first, to talk a little bit about where the idea for the book came from and the angle with which you decided to push the question of what revolution means.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you. The idea of this book and the idea of phenomenological view on revolution in Belarus was some expansion of our previous collaboration with other seminars and roundtables in Vienna, in Warsaw too. And we are near to be pioneers of this idea to declare such social protests in Belarus, declare as revolution. And for us, it was some challenge to do this way, because for many Belarusians, it's not so obvious. They are under the Marxist, or I don't know, classical politological definition of revolution as shift or change of political power. And if we haven't any signs of regime authorities in Belarus to be changed, that there is no revolution at all for them. And our task was to in some way deconstruct this myth of revolution as only political change in society. And as I think Andrzej, first of all, and me as his co-author, try to do all our best to elaborate this notion of revolution and try to answer how is Belarusian protests, in what manner they are revolution. And maybe Andrzej could add to this point.
Thank you. I would like to say, first of all, that it was for me a honor to collaborate with Pavel on this project. And I'm very happy that it turned out that my research in history of ideas and history of phenomenological movement could contribute to the reflection on the Belarusian revolution. And closer, so yes. And the starting point actually of perhaps not our direct collaboration, but my interest on Belarus and on Belarusian internal relationship was the collaboration with Olga, because we met first time on the phonological conferences in Prague, in Minsk also, and actually the trigger point for me to collaborate on the social problems and political problems of Belarus was closing of the university, European Humanities University in Minsk. It was supported by George Soros, and it was closed by Lukashenko in 2004, yes, and it was a great shock for me. I wrote then immediately a letter to Tim Snyder, and Tim published the protest letters, I assume, in America, and the rector of European Humanities University was stunned that in America already this event is well known. So, we have collaborated by other opportunities. We have taken part the other phonological conferences, and then came the revolution, and we met with Pavel on the conference in Vienna concerning the future of Belarus in Europe, in European Union. And yes, it was the start of our collaboration. And what we wanted to reflect in our book, it was the question of some similarities, but also lessons from the revolution of solidarity for the future of Belarusian change in order to change the political system and then to overcome this dictatorship. So first similarity, it was that the revolution of solidarity in 1980 was also unsuccessful. So it was ended with repression of this wartime, and but after 9 years we had the revolutionary breakthrough and new free elections on 1st June, and so it is a kind of hope for Belarusian fight for us. And the references point of our reflection was on the one hand Charles Tilly and his great book about the European revolutions from 1492 to 1999, and but also Józef Tischner and his Ethics of Solidarity, where he defined revolution as the real revolution is actually always a spiritual revolution. It is a change in consciousness. So for in our interpretation, what happened in Belarus and real success of Belarusian revolution was this change of awareness, change of self-identity of Belarusian society. And in the first chapter of our book, Pavel contributed with a lot of empirical also studies on who document this change. And so perhaps from my part it's everything now, and yes. I forgot to say that the book of, as you said already, of Olga was very important for us. Olga wrote a book, "The Revolution has a woman's face," yes, and it was. Yes, and this concept of revolution in progress, it was also a key concept in our interpretation.
Okay, I'm going to ask Olga about this now. So one of the definitions of revolution that they draw on here is by Karol Modzelewski, who is looking at revolution as an experience that overcomes a division between a public and private self, between a public self that is forced to dissimulate and live a lie, and a private self in which truth is only spoken about at home. And Modzelewski talks about revolution as an experience that restores authenticity, authenticity to the public sphere as well, and that people who have lived their whole lives with their heads down and lowered in silence are finally able to raise their faces. And it is about this concept of subjectivity, in the sense of podmiotowość, in the sense of what makes a human being and a responsible agent and not simply an object, and under what conditions, do people become subjects, and that concept of subjectivity, as in English, it's actually much more ambiguous, because subjectivity in English is both subjektywność and podmiotowość. It's a much clearer distinction in both Russian and Polish, where you have subjectivity as, as what makes you an actor as opposed to a passive recipient. And this was a key word during Solidarity. It was key during the Maidan, and it was key in Belarus. I mentioned this at the seminar yesterday, but 10 years ago during the Maidan, I was talking to Darek Strola here, and I said something about podmiotowość, and he said, wow, Marcy, podmiotowość, subjectivity, the last time I heard that word was during the times of Solidarność. And what does that mean? And the particular inflection, that also very much captivated me watching from afar about Belarus was also this gendered aspect of subjectivity. that Olga is now going to call Revolution with a woman's face, that was, I think, tightly connected for you with this idea of horizontalność, horizontality as opposed to verticality. And how do you move from the vertical to the horizontal? So now I'm going to ask Olga to talk a little bit about the relationship between horizontal solidarity and gender and feminism, and also to talk about the work that was done before 2020 to develop the conversations that enabled this to happen in 2020.
So, yeah. My idea in my book was that these mass protests were about changing of self-understanding, collective self-understanding of Belarusians, and that people understood that they can rule, that they don't need Lukashenko now, that they can have country in their own hands, so to say, and that they can organize everything, and that every person can be politician in this sense. And this idea was proposed by women. And interesting, it was in 2020, in August, that we got this United Women team, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Maria Kolesnikova, and Veronika Tsepkala, and it was a collective institution, so to say, and they decided very quickly that they can be together and that they are like a pattern for all the people to be together, to develop something together. The idea was that the goal of society is more important than individual ambitions, that horizontality is very important, and all the experiences are very important, that all the experiences that we have in our private life, we can bring now in this political area, and in the sense that in private life we interconnecting, we caring for each other, and now we can do this in the broader public space, and people understood that they can go in this space because they have this attentiveness, empathy, and help from another people. They are not alone. And I think this idea was most important, and this idea was proposed by women, that we can, and after my book, I develop this notion further, and for example, the notion of caring solidarity. And I think it was very important for the start of revolution to understand that we are interconnecting and that we can bring very different ideas how we can develop this interconnection, and also in political terms, not only in such a cultural, social terms, but to understand, to be politicians. I decided to go to Coordination Council as well. It was start of this Coordination Council. We organized a feminist group in this council, and it was in my case also. Now Pavel is political active, that we can bring the best of us in this sphere from our different experiences and from other different private lives and private interconnections. And interconnections, horizontality, experiences, reaching, creativity. It was idea that we make this creative. All of this was proposed by women. And of course, we can understand that Lukashenko and all these armed men around him, like Putin as well, they can do with these people what they want when they organized, when they have institution and so on. And we can say that people are a little bit naive, but they understand that they are another, that they imagined that they can have another society where these contribution of every person is important for the build of new institution and political institution as well. And it was about this imaginary and about supporting of this imaginary, new imaginary. And I hope very much that we still have this in country, in the different diasporas. There are a lot of Belarusians and different countries, and we develop different small and bigger initiatives. And in this sense, revolution is, we have ongoing revolution. But the truth is that this notion of revolution in progress proposed my Armenian colleagues. It was a small discussion during online discussion during the protest, and we compared the processes in Armenia and in Belarus, and they said, yeah, there is a revolution in progress. We think there is a start of revolution in progress in Belarus, what we see now. And it's also interesting that like process between, not only in Belarus, between Belarusians, but collaboration with my colleagues in other countries. And if we speak about women, I was surprised also that women propose so many different ideas how we can be together in this, how we can connect this private and public, and to try to be politicians, to stay at the street, to develop new form of solidarity, to think of new forms of institution, about politics. And women were visible every time, not only women, of course, but it was a lot of ideas which women proposed.
So one of the things that I found also very inspiring, watching again from afar, as you see, I have a habit of falling in love with other people's revolutions that are not my own. I haven't actually done anything very brave like Pavel and Olga and Maxim had done. I just watch and take notes and then write about it. But there was a discourse that had been developed by Olga and her colleagues that also had to do with domestic violence, with the problem of violence and largely men's violence against women. You know, and a trope that in Russian you say "Bьет значит любит." You know, he beats you, it means he loves you, which I'm going to ask both Pavel and Olga to talk about. That then expanded outside of the private realm. So going back to Modzalewski's point that revolution is this moment of a bringing together of the public and private realm, that domestic violence ceased being something, and your friend Yulia Mickiewicz has spoken about this a lot, ceased being something that only mattered in the private realm and also became a way to understand what was happening in the public realm. And I sense that it became something broader as well. It became something that an attempt to shift from a notion of strength that was fundamentally vertical in a kind of Ktokovo way, like who is on the top and going to crush the people beneath them, to a notion of strength that Olga here is calling caring. You know, can there be a strength and a power that is rooted not in vertical abuse and domination, but that is rooted in horizontal caring for one another and feeling empathy for one another? You know, and that was an incredibly inspiring thing to watch. And I think it was about much more than just, instead of men being in positions of leadership, women being in positions of leadership, because it was about a whole different paradigm of what power means and of what strength means. So maybe I'll ask Pavel and Olga to weigh in on this.
For me, the main problem of violence in Belarusian context is that it was mostly the hidden violence all this time. This violence was mostly as domestic violence that was not visible in public sphere. Because Belarus mostly is a domain of patriarchy. And Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko is the most evident figure of this patriarchy. And he was that person who said that that Belarusians don't need any law to prevent domestic violence, because we have no such problem in our country. Бьет, значит, любит. Yes, it's not a problem. It's about these traditional values, about this mood of happy family with such structure of relations. And for Belarusians, it's quite paradoxical situation, because sociologically speaking, as I wrote in this book, Belarusians mostly are against any signs of violence, any signs of public violence. And maybe this negative attitude to the violence was one of the most reason for mass protests in 2020. Because for Belarus it was shock. And we also use, as our colleague Tatiana Shchitsova, this metaphor of the solidarity of the shaken from Jan Patočka. And it was the shock for all Belarusians from all professions or from old ages to see this extraordinary level of violence in our streets and in our society. And of course, it was some shift in values between power and society. Because for society, it was not possible to have such level of violence as something like ordinary or something like a variant of norm. But for this power, it's okay, because for the repression thinking, for the repressive practices, violence is okay. Violence is okay in family relations, in public relations, as a form of some attitudes between state and person. And as for me, for Belarusian, it was the moment of truth, in some manner, the moment when they have started to say, we are not agree with the situation where violence is a norm for our society, and where we are only objects for this power and not subjects of our policy and of our country. And this shift in mind, this shift in values of society is the main sign of revolution in our terms.
I'm gonna ask Andrzej to follow up on this. So you mentioned Tatiana Shchitsova, whose name I could be pronouncing, and the idea of the solidarity of the shaken. And Jan Patočka has this idea of the solidarity of the shaken as the solidarity of those even who might be on opposite sides, and he uses the example of the trenches during the First World War, who have experienced a confrontation with mortality and been shaken to the core. And he says the solidarity of the shaken is not the solidarity of those who have forgiven and forgotten, it's the solidarity of those who understand. And it was a very particular moment in his life when he comes up with this idea. It's in the 1970s, and he is also in circles that are comprised of both former Stalinists and former victims of Stalinism who have now come together, as dissidents. The other idea that you mention in this book, also from Tatiana, is the transformation of ethnos into ethos. So the transformation of a kind of ethnic community into a kind of ethical community that I think was arguably crucial both in Solidarność, and in Belarus. This idea, I don't think inclusivnost was a word that was used back in Solidarity's times, but it was a concept. It was an overcoming of all sorts of divisions. It was the romantic moment when the Jews and the Christians and the Catholics and the Marxists and the fathers and the sons and the workers and the intellectuals are able to overcome all these divisions and come together. And that was part of the ecstatic utopian quality of it, the possibility of overcoming those boundaries. And that was something that I think was very much at stake in Belarus as well. Can you move from a notion of community that is rooted in some kind of ethnic notion to something that transcends that? And how does that come about? Maybe I'll make Andrzej take this.
Yes. As far as this transgression from the community of ethnos to the community of ethos, I think that in case of Belarus, it's a very complicated question. And the difference is perhaps that this national component of the solidarity revolution was quite obvious in Poland. I think that actually even Zygmunt Modzelewski, he said in his memories from the Solidarity Revolution that even him, even though he as socialist is not so connected to the idea of nation, he was using this national rhetoric in his speeches of the coordinatory board with other movement of solidarity, and it was really very important part of this revolution. So that and in his interpretation, actually, what decided about this national component was this danger of Russian invasion. So therefore, this Polish solidarity, the solidarity of workers, was meant also as a national solidarity. And the question in Belarus is really the question of the relationship of Belarusian ethnos to this Russian ethnos, and from Belarusian national self-definition, self-identification, and this difference to the Russian self-identification. It was for me very important because Pavel asked me to reconstruct the, so to say, original content of the Giedroyć doctrine, and to compare this original content with the way how this doctrine is understood now, how it is applied to the foreign policy in Poland, and especially to the relationship between Poland and Belarus. And yes, I was really impressed by reading the text from Kultura from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and when I realized that actually a lot of solutions proposed in Kultura was later really implemented to the Polish reality. That actually one could say that Kultura was a kind of didascalia of the play that we all played in the 80s in Solidarity movement, and now actually we are live in the reality which was invented during this discussion in this journal. Especially Mieroszewski was for me really a kind of political prophet, and his prophecy, political prophecy, was based on a kind of, on the one hand, political realism, but specially understood. He succeeded in a kind of synthesis between realism and romanticism. I think that I tried to interpret his doctrine in terms of realistic romanticism or romantic realism rather. So,
Romantic realism.
Romantic realism, yes, yes, and in this vision of the future of Europe, of our borderlands here, and the relationship between Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and Belarus. Also, Russia plays a very important role, and of course, Miroszewski was romantician and enas and realist enas, so that he didn't say about the change, democratic change in Russia, but I think that, of course, he didn't wrote a lot about Polish-Belarusian relationships, but I think that what he said about this community of ethnos and the relationship between Belarusian ethnos and Russian ethnos is very, it is something what we have to interpret anew, and it is a question actually. But we also, the part of our book is a transcription of the discussions between Polish oppositionists, like for example Bogdan Borusewicz, Zbigniew Janas, Janusz Onyszkiewicz, and contemporary Belarusian oppositionists, among others Dobrowolski, Professor Milinkiewicz, and they also spoke about this window of opportunity for the successful Belarusian revolution, and as far I understood properly, I don't know, but I think it's quite right that they connected the possibility, this window of possibility, with the future of relationship also in Russia, so that actually it is hard to expect, and perhaps it's not so good to expect the revolution in Belarus like in Ukraine, for example. So it's a kind another relation. So, but these are very complex questions, and I think that much more to say about it has Pavel or Olga. It's not what I can speak about.
I could add shortly that as I think the mostly phenomenon who unite all of us, Polish, Ukrainian, and Belarusian people, is that phenomenon of solidarity and these effects of solidarity for society. And because as all totalitarian or authoritarian regimes try to do, is to atomize people and try to let them alone. And trying to say that we are together against you, against your wish or dreams on freedom, against your dreams on rights, human rights, and so on. But solidarity is this awakening of society after this totalitarian dream, and its possibility to see eyes one to another and see how much we are, how many people are in the streets, that we share the same values, the same slogans, the same desires to be free. And this experience is something like existential break for any individual who was engaged in such phenomenon of solidarity. I think that peasants in Poland who were in solidarity movement in Gdańsk, in other towns of Poland, they experience the same feeling of community, of this mutual visions of future, of our commonness. And for Ukrainians and for Belarusians too, this phenomenon of solidarity was a great sign of future deliberation for all our societies from this Egyptian prison of Russian Empire, and for us it was something like existential motive to be, not to be, but to be here, to be active, to be subjects, and to be themselves.
So I know we're running out of time. I'm going to ask one more question that I'm going to ask all three of them to answer. And this has to do with how this experience changes people. You know, one of the ways in which I was able to understand the Maidan and appreciate it was through the eyes of my Polish friends who had been formed by Solidarność. You know, and I was in Vienna at the time, and I saw that the Austrians didn't understand what was happening in Ukraine the way the Poles did. You know, and I felt like for those, especially that generation who were veterans of solidarity, not because they were idealist, and not because, I mean, people like Adam Michnik and Alex Smoller and Agnieszka Holland and Kostek Gebert, they are not idealist. They don't think everyone's going to live happily ever after. They've seen everything crushed time and time again. But they also had that experience of that overcoming of boundaries and that experience of solidarity, that revolution of what human beings are capable of in the best instance, that I think fundamentally transformed them and made them able to recognize it when they saw it again. I don't know that they ever counted on living it to see a second time in their lifetimes. And when I got to Kiev in 2014, I saw Kostek Gebert, who I'd known for 20-some years. I like to think he's always happy to see me, but he picked me up and twirled me around. I mean, there was a kind of ecstasy about it, that this revelation of what human beings in the best instance are capable of. And it made me appreciate, too, how they had been transformed by having gone through that, by having acted that out in their lifetimes. So my last question then to all three of them is going to be how these respective experiences have changed them. You know, so Andrzej came of age through Solidarność, you know, and Pavel took an active role in the Belarusian Revolution and Progress, you know, and Olga took an active role, and Olga went to prison. You know, and so I'm also going to ask you how that experience in prison changed you and changed how you understand revolution in retrospect.
I'm perhaps not the best person to talk about the change in result of solidarity movement, because at this time I was so involved in reading Gombrowicz and his diary, the Monday me, Tuesday me, and Wednesday me too. So actually I skipped this experience, but I was once at the manifestation on 3rd May, where it was organized close to the cathedral, and I saw these tanks of the contrary sides of the street, and they started to push us together, and we flew to the small place between buildings, and then I saw the woman in kitchen of I think it's a restaurant. Bazyliszek. So I escaped from this trap through Bazyliszek, the best restaurant, and it was my experience of solidarity, so to say. And after that, but it was very important to feel it in body and to reflect over this experience after 40 years. On the occasion of next revolution, in order to better understand what happened and to think about actually whole life and how important was from the perspective. So it's what I have to say, but in context of the experiences of Pavel and Olga, there is no talking about. Nothing.
In 2020, I was very skeptical because I was very many years in this business. I see all protests in Belarus from the early of 90s. And for me, it was maybe the next trial to change something in this unchangeable situation. Because the autocracy in Belarus was cemented with some pact between authoritarian power and some population who want only stability or economical, I don't know, some signs of stable economical life, and not democracy, not freedom, or not such ideal values. And for me, it was also a very exciting experience when I realized that something other in atmosphere now, something different as it was usual, and it was atmosphere of some action and some solidarity between people. The most exciting experience for me in 2020 was maybe the first great action of demonstration of protests in the first weekend after shame election of falsified elections of the president of Belarus. And I was in a small village near Minsk this time, and we have no any internet connections, any information about what is it in Minsk, what drastic things were here. And when we, as many Belarusians, were read this news, we were shocked, first of all, and we understood that we could not but act now. We should go to the streets, and we go to Minsk. And you know, near Minsk there are many small villages, about 500 people or 1,000 people who live there. And for me, it was some shock or some exciting experience when I drive with a car through these villages and I see people with white, red, white flags, with their willingness to join this protest and to say no to this regime of violence, of falsification, and of unfreedom. And for me, it was the first sign of that. That's revolution. That is not only short protests or short wave of some anger of people. That is about other situation in society and in the state.
The question is about changes. Pavel was in prison as well, but in the year 2010, and I tried to help in this situation. And then in 2011 and 12, we organized the Patichka conference in Minsk and discuss how philosopher can be active in such situation and such protest situation, in the situation when we need to do something in public sphere. And but what it means that we discuss this as philosopher, and we were active during, I don't know, all these 10 years, more than 10 years. But about when I think about my changes, I was surprised and inspired by women. And I decided that I need work in this sphere of feminist philosophy, and I think that we need caring democracy, the new type of this, that care must be in the center of politics, care in the sense that it will be new, that we think about responsibility for care in another way, not that we change the situation with responsibility for care which we have in our society. And I think it's important not only for women, it's important for the society in ecological sense also, because care is alternative to competition and to consumption. And I decided that I need women and gender lenses, and that I can also help not only women, but to think about these changes for Belarusian society, not only. I think that we need the changes everywhere.
Well, I think we're now I'm going to thank Olga and Pavel and Andrzej. We're going to take a short break, and then there's going to be a second part of this debate, which Ludger will tell you about momentarily. So thank you.